We begin the story with the spoiled brat that is Catarina Claes. She screams at her maids, telling them she'd prefer a pink bow over the blue one she's wearing, even though she's the one who had originally picked the blue bow to wear in the first place. But she still has the audacity to threaten firing all of her maids. She's the daughter and only child of a wealthy duke, Luigi Claes, who instantly garners the affection of his daughter. Duke Claes introduces Catarina to Giordo Stuart, the third prince of the kingdom, to which she graciously bows when meeting him. When Giordo returns the greeting, Catarina's eyes sparkle like it's love at first sight. The two take a stroll through the garden, with Catarina holding on to the prince's arms while feigning that her feet hurt, which is why she can't walk on her own. They spot Giordo's twin brother, Alan, who scoffs when he notices the two staring at him. Catarina wonders why Alan is so rude and comments on how they look nothing alike. Giordo responds that people say that all the time. He then walks away from Catarina, and when she goes after him, she trips. Another life flashes in her mind. A young baby girl, the youngest in her family. A girl who would grow up to rambunctiously climb the trees. A girl who would hate getting chased by dogs in the morning. A girl who would stay up all night playing video games. That same girl was Catarina Claes in her previous life. Catarina awakens with a bloody forehead, and people concerned, asking if she's okay. But all she could think about is her final memory as a high school girl, the night she stayed up late playing otome games. The morning that followed, where she rushed out the door late to school and met her demise at the age of 17. The huge influx of memories hits her and causes her to faint. A few days later, back at the mansion, Catarina has made a full recovery, and even though the prince blames himself for walking away and making her fall, Catarina took the blame on herself for making everyone worry, which caused Giordo and the maid to become shocked. But what was even more shocking to them was the daughter of a duke peeling off her band-aid and being so unworried about the blemish on her forehead. Giordo tells Catarina even if she's carefree, high society won't feel the same, causing her to roll her eyes and think about how constricting and annoying it is to be in a noble family compared to her previous life. The next thing she hears, however, is the prince asking if that would be alright. She quickly responds, yes, pretending as if she had heard exactly what the prince had been saying the entire time. The prince then takes his leave and tells her he'll be back to present himself, but she has no idea what he means by present. But when the maid congratulates Catarina, she realizes she fucked up because she accidentally accepted Prince Giordo's marriage proposal. Catarina tries explaining to her parents that the prince simply felt responsible for causing her injury, but the parents ignore what she's saying to congratulate their daughter for catching the eyes of the prince. Catarina falls on her bed, unsure of what to do next. Because even though Giordo is a nice guy, she doesn't feel attracted to the 8-year-old boy. After all, she's a 17-year-old otaku on the inside. She sighs, but then suddenly remembers the life she's experiencing is similar to an otome game she had beaten. In the game, Prince Giordo was black-hearted and sadistic, but wore a beautiful smile, and the evil rich girl he was engaged to blamed him for the wound on her forehead, and she screams when she remembers the evil rich girl in the story was none other than who she is today, Catarina Claes. She heads to her desk, trying to recall everything she can about the game they're in called Fortune Lover, a dating sim set in a magic academy, the main heroine being Maria, a commoner with light magic who enters the academy at the age of 15, where she meets the 4 love interests: Prince Giordo, his twin brother Alan, then Keith Claes, Catarina's adopted brother, and the son of the Prime Minister, Nicole Ascart. The main villainess being Giordo's fiancée, Catarina Claes. In the good ending of Giordo's route, Catarina tortures Maria constantly. She eventually gets stripped of her rank and exiled, while Maria gets engaged happily to Giordo. In the bad ending of Giordo's route, Catarina attacks Maria with a knife, but gets killed by Giordo, who decides to protect Maria. With him having murdered his fiancée, he breaks up with Maria and flees the country. The more she researches, the more Catarina is convinced this is the world of Fortune Lover, meaning all routes lead to doom. Inside Catarina's mind, she consults with herself on how to avoid the impending doom. Fearless Rena suggests calling her engagement off, But spineless Rina feels bad for dumping Giordo. Happy Rina suggests not going to the Magic Academy. However, studious Rina says it's the duty of all those who possess magic to attend the Magic Academy. She then plays a projector, showing Catarina having manifested her earth magic at the age of 5, making a little bump in the ground. Studious Rina then says it would probably be easy to just not bully the game's heroine. But even so, spineless Rina thinks they could still be framed to be the evil mastermind. After all, Giordo is a black-hearted prince who wears the facade of an angel. Spineless Rina thinks it's possible he might vilify her so he can end up with the heroine. With her schizo thoughts unsure of what to do, fearless Rina tells them she just has to boost her swordsmanship and magic power so she can fend for herself. And with her skills, even if she's exiled, she won't have any trouble finding work. She began executing her plan with sword training, and everyone takes notice of how strange Catarina's been acting post-injury. She learned from a book that in order to boost magic ability, it's important to converse with the source of one's magic. She picked up gardening, even though her maid has no idea what the fuck is going on. Prince Giordo, his parents, and Catarina's mother walk in on her, causing Catarina to stand back, a little embarrassed. But the sight of Catarina embarrasses her mother even more and causes her to faint. Giordo walks over and Catarina explains once again that she's trying to converse with the earth. This almost causes the prince to break out in laughter, but he maintains his composure and commends her for her unique method of training. Rina is happy that he isn't mad at her, relieved that she isn't going to be exiled. While she's distracted, Giordo gets on one knee and asks her to accept his marriage proposal. So of course, she unknowingly accepts it because she wasn't paying attention. Night falls, and Catarina sits by herself, thinking how this is all turning out just like the game, with all endings being bad for her. She just doesn't want to die young again. She gets called by her father, who introduces her new adopted brother, Keith, the second Doom Flag. Keith is actually a distant relative of their family, who lived a lonely life, constantly being bullied by his siblings for being the son of a mistress. In the original story, after the Claes family takes him in, Catarina bullied him just as harshly. To bury the pain, he grows up to be a playboy until he meets the game's heroine, who cures his loneliness and makes him truly fall in love. But when Catarina interferes with that, her endings are getting exiled or killed with magic. Rina has another meeting in her mind, saying there's no choice but to put Keith in a box and dump him under a bridge. But studious Rina uses her senses to tell them that if they make sure he doesn't feel lonely, he'll never have the need for the heroine to fill his loneliness, thus preventing another doom flag for Rina. She heads into Keith's room to show him around the garden and tells him to call her big sister, even though in their noble dynamic, it would technically be considered very rude. They head out to the garden, where Rina proudly shows off her eggplants and tomatoes she planted. She then takes his hand, causing Keith to blush as they run to the next area, a giant tree where Rina says the view from the top is truly the best. Catarina then begins to scale the tree, which she is quite skilled at since in her previous life everyone had called her a wild monkey. However, she slipped and fell on Keith, screaming and telling him not to die, that she finally got to have a cute little brother and was upset that she killed him with her butt. But of course, he was perfectly fine. Later, Prince Giordo says he's surprised to hear that Rina fell from a tree, causing him to almost break out in laughter over her silliness. Giordo notices Rina's parents seeming more loving than usual, so Rina explains with Keith's introduction, her mother thought that Keith was her father's illegitimate son, and they almost got a divorce over this. But since the misunderstanding was cleared, they've been overly affectionate towards each other. After sword training, Rina has her brother show off some of his earth magic. He makes a dirt doll dance, but all Rina sees is money in her eyes, because if she could make dirt dolls, it would be a cheap form of labor that she can use in case she gets exiled. She asks Keith to teach her how to make dirt dolls, and with sparkles in her eyes, Keith reluctantly says yes. He then summons a giant earth doll, and with excitement, Rina runs towards it. Keith tries to stop her, but it's too late as the doll knocks her out. She wakes up to her worried parents, who ask if she's alright. Rina's father then explains that Keith has powerful magic that once injured his siblings because it went out of control. This is why Keith promised he wouldn't use his magic for no reason. Keith took all the blame for himself for hurting Rina, but Rina explains that it was all her fault for talking him into using it. She jumps out of the bed because she feels obligated to apologize. She then eventually reaches her servants and learns that Keith locked himself in his room. She knocks on his door, but to no avail. Keith tells her he can't let himself get close to her. He flashes back to a time where his brother shoved him to the ground, and started throwing stones at a bird's nest he was watching. Completely distraught, he unleashed an explosive earth magic that injured his siblings, leading his family to eventually reject him. With the painful memories in mind, Keith tells himself as long as he's alone, he can't hurt anyone. He then opens his eyes when Rina calls his name. She begins chopping down the door with an axe, and once she gets inside, she bows and apologizes for making him use his magic. Keith tries to blame himself again, but Rina grasps his hands and tells him he just needs to start training so he can control his magic. She then tells him they'll always be together, causing him to cry and thank her for her kind words. But it's not a complete happy ending, since Rina's mom is ready to punish her for chopping down the door. It's another beautiful day for Rina to work on her harvest. With it now being a few months since her memories from her past life came back, taking care of the fields has become a hobby of hers. She becomes saddened to see her plants wilting, even with the water and fertilizer. So Keith and Jordo try to console her, only to realize they might both be love rivals. But Rina is none the wiser, thinking the two have just become really good friends. We move to dinner time, where Duke Claes explains Rina has been invited to a prestigious tea party. However, Duchess Claes gets out of her chair to say Rina shouldn't go because she eats like a disgusting pig. Duke Claes then suggests Keith go with Rina, since Rina needs the experience and Keith can keep an eye on her. But Rina wonders why she's being babysat if she is the older sister, as she continues to munch like a cow feeding on hay. The next day, we transition to Rina and Keith being greeted by the 4 Hunt sisters at the entrance to the tea party. The youngest daughter, Mary Hunt, greets them with a soft and meek voice. And when Rina greets her back, Mary moves behind her older sisters. At the tea party, all the girls fawn over Catarina, who is famous for being engaged to the prince. She breaks away exhausted from all the greetings, but notices the desserts untouched, so she starts to have a little snack. Keith appears, wondering why she's so lost in thought, and catches her red-handed because he knows she's thinking of taking all the desserts home. Poor Rina was forbidden from eating any sweets after the one time she had eaten one right off the floor in front of her mother because of the 5-second rule. And with Keith scolding her, she proclaims she has no choice but to eat them all now. So she starts to viciously munch down on the desserts like she's never heard of diabetes. However, this comes back to bite her, since she ends up with stomach pain and has to run to the bathroom. Leaving the restroom, she stumbles upon a beautiful flower garden and spots Mary smelling a rose by herself. Rina asks what she's doing out here alone, so Mary tells her she doesn't like crowded places very much. Rina thinks that Mary seems afraid right now and pinches herself, wondering if her face is a little too scary. To keep up the conversation, Rina remarks on how beautiful the garden is, and asks Mary to introduce her gardener to her. To Rina's surprise, however, Mary tends to all the flowers here, causing Rina to latch onto Mary, asking what her secret is. But Mary doesn't handle her personal space being invaded too well, so Rina backs away when she sees Mary on the verge of tears. Rina then explains she was excited because she wanted some advice on how to tend to her dying plants, and invites Mary over to her house to check out her garden. On another day, Mary meets with Rina in her farming area with her dying plants. Mary then pulls out a book and suggests moving the plants to a place where they can receive even more water and fertilizer. They begin to replant, water, and spend their time together until they eventually see the plants become much healthier over time. The two become the best of friends, with Rina praising Mary for her having a green thumb. And even with the plants nursed back to health, Rina invites Mary to visit anytime. After Mary leaves, Keith says he's glad Rina was able to cheer her up. He had overheard at the tea party that Mary's mother was Marquess Hunt's second wife, and because of that, the 3 older sisters would verbally abuse Mary all the time. Mary's mother would eventually pass away too, leaving her with no place to feel like she belonged. Keith also mentions Mary's engagement to Jordo's twin brother, Alan, which gives Rina PTSD flashbacks of the 3rd Doom flag. Alan, spending his life with a deep rivalry and inferiority complex toward his brother Jordo. On his route, he eventually meets the heroine, which lightens his heart and improves his relationship with Jordo. Catarina hardly appears in this route at all because Mary takes over as the love rival instead. In the happy ending, Mary congratulates the couple and leaves, while in the bad ending, she just ends up with Alan, which isn't bad in any way, causing Rina to feel jealous that she's the only one destined for tragedies. However, this isn't for certain, since the garden event had Alan instead of Rina saying Mary had a green thumb and praising her gardening skills. Although, Rina can't help but wonder if she ruined Mary's chance to fall for Alan. Over tea, Rina congratulates Mary for getting engaged, and Mary is happy to be engaged to her prince, just like Rina. Unfortunately, the congratulations turned to shock when Rina realized Mary was so happy when Rina told her she had a green thumb. Mary ended up telling Alan what Rina had said to her, leaving no opportunity to drop his signature line at all. The next day, when tending to her garden, a maid lets Rina know Prince Alan has shown up suddenly to visit her. She greets him, only to get the stink eye in return. Alan then shouts at Rina, telling her to stop seducing his fiancée. Rina has no clue what he means, so Alan explains that he invited his girl over, but Mary canceled on him because she already had plans with Catarina, and Catarina is the only thing she ever talks about. Rina denies the seducing accusations and tells Alan any girl would accept the invite of a guy she actually likes, so he must be boring as fuck. He takes the insult as a personal challenge to a showdown. The two decide to have a tree climbing contest, where the first one to reach the top wins. The match begins and Alan's jaw drops when he sees Rina blitz her way up to the top. Alan demands a rematch, but even as the day turns to evening, he shows no chance of ever beating her. Then he runs away to challenge her on another day. He would suddenly barge into Rina's house, challenging her day after day, losing more climbing contests and even sword matches, all while Rina would win flawlessly while swinging like a monkey. Prince Jordo would begin to take notice of Alan's daily challenges and sees Alan beginning to seem like he was having fun. One day, he came for a challenge only to see Jordo spending time with her already. Jordo reminded Alan he'd been losing daily and wondered when he was going to give up, but Alan was determined. So Rina suggested that they battle out their piano skills. Rina performed well, however, Alan played at a more advanced level, enough to make Rina blush. Everyone began to clap, and Rina congratulated him for playing the song much better than she had. But sadly, none of the compliments were effective, because Alan felt on the inside everyone thought of him as a worthless failure. He runs off, and Rina finds him sitting beneath a tree. He explains he feels like his talents are meaningless in comparison to Jordo, and explains he's been compared to his brother since the day he was born. All he's ever been told was that he was the dregs left behind after Jordo took all the good qualities. However, Rina explains that Jordo has things he's good at and things he's bad at, and that he isn't perfect. Everyone has flaws. But Alan has never heard of Jordo not having things he couldn't handle. Rina gives an evil smirk and reveals Jordo's secret fear of snakes. She takes Alan behind a bush as they hear Jordo looking for them, and she then tosses her toy snake at Jordo to give him a little scare. But then Jordo finds the two, uttering Catarina's name, saying there's no way she'd throw a toy snake at her fiancé, and then he walks off to go tell her mom about the tree climbing and the toy, which makes her chase after him, begging Jordo not to tell on her, all while giving Alan a good laugh. Another day begins with Rina enjoying her favorite romance novel, Sophia and the Emerald Princess. It's a tale about a friendship between a princess and a commoner. As she lies in bed, she wonders why her favorite story is considered lowbrow reading in noble society, and she reminisces on all the time she spent immersed reading manga in her previous life, wishing she had someone to talk to about this passion for good stories. Like I wish you'd hit that subscribe button and like this video, because I've got a passion for good shoujo stories in anime, manga, and manhwa, and the more subscribers I get, the more I get to share my favorite stories with you. I'd appreciate it. Rina gets an invite to a tea party being hosted by Giordo's family, and she's determined to find a romance novel buddy there. On the day of the party, Alan teases Giordo about the toy snake thing and laughs thinking about the scared face Giordo makes when seeing snakes. Giordo reminds Alan that Rina is his fiancée, and even though Alan doesn't think much of it, Giordo walks away saying he has no intention of losing Rina to his twin brother. The party begins and Rina can't help but stuff her face with zero remorse. She takes a sip of tea and makes an excuse to head to the bathroom because she's hit her limit. On the way to the restroom, she spots a dog, and remember, she has a big fear of them. The dog chases after her, with her screaming until she evades it by climbing up a tree. We then hear from below the other kids harassing the girl with the white hair, but all Rina can think about is if she jumps down now, the other kids might tell her parents she was climbing trees. But she can't hold it in any longer, and she decides to jump down, telling them all to kindly get out of the way, which scares the kids into running, but that wasn't her intention at all. However, when Rina sees the girl with the white hair up close, she thinks of how beautiful she is, but dips out quickly because she needs to use the restroom badly. Rina eventually heads back to the party to continue her ravaging of the desserts, but then the girl with white hair appears. Rina thinks this girl is like the white-haired Sophie from her favorite novel, that the princess would often sneak out to visit. She recites the princess's lines when she says, "Your hair is as lovely as silk." Then Rina tries to touch the girl's hair. The girl mentions the Emerald Princess, getting Rina into a frantic excitement, having potentially found her reading buddy. Unfortunately, the excitement ends when Keith tells them the tea party is over. So Rina invites the girl over to her house as she gets pulled away. Later at the Claes Manor, Rina excitedly rushes to meet her new reading friend, but is also shocked to find the girl had brought her beautiful brother as well. The boy thanks Rina for inviting his sister to play, and then he introduces himself as Nicole Ascart. After greeting him back, Rina realizes Nicole's the fourth Doom Flag. He's the son of the Prime Minister and childhood friends with Jordo and Alan, but also not super talkative. Her conscience explains that Rina had never played Nicole's route before, but she learned from her friend Achan that Nicole has a sister complex, so the in-game rival ends up being the younger sister Sophia, which is good news since Catarina never appears in Nicole's route, so Rina can enjoy her time with her new reading buddy to the fullest extent. As Rina and Sophia bond over books, Nicole observes them from afar. Eventually, Sophia gets called to go home, and when she stands up, Rina catches a glimpse at her beautiful hair and asks to touch it. Sophia doesn't answer at first, and this makes Rina wonder if she's being a little too forward. However, Sophia doesn't understand Rina. Everyone has told her she has white hair like a grandma and bloody eyes that make her look like a creepy cursed child. Nicole interjects, calling what the haters said about his sister as slander, all because the other adults were jealous of the power and influence the Ascart family held. They began insulting the youngest daughter. Unfortunately, Sophia took their words to heart. But to Rina, Sophia's white hair is as beautiful as silk, and red eyes twinkle like rubies, and truly desired for Sophia to be friends with her. These words brought Sophia tears of joy. On the way home, Sophia was happy that the words her brother had told her family finally came true. He had always said one day she'd find a friend who accepts and understands her. This made Nicole happy as well. Later, the Claes siblings would eventually be invited to the Ascart household. Upon meeting the parents, Rina found it no surprise that they were beautiful as well. The parents thanked Rina for befriending their daughter because she looked much happier these days. And as the two girls hung out, Nicole and Keith would observe them. Eventually, the hangout would come to an end, and Sophia would run back to her room to retrieve a book she wanted to lend to Rina. This made Rina think of her old friend Achan, who read manga, watched anime, and played Ultimate games with her. Nicole then thanked Rina for spending time with his sister, but Rina is just as grateful that he and his parents have been so nice to her, and remarks how lovely his parents are, telling him he was truly blessed to have such a wonderful family. This made Nicole smile, and this gorgeous smile made Rina blush. Sophia then finally comes back with a book, but when Rina looks over at Keith, she wonders if he's also been ensnared by Nicole's charms as well. On the way home, Rina thinks about how to protect Keith from Nicole, all while Keith thinks of how he has another love rival. 7 years pass, and Rina is now 15 years old. She reflects on everything she did to avoid all the Doom Flags, although she unfortunately didn't have much magic talent. She is first greeted by Jordo, who wishes her a happy birthday, and then the rest of the friends walk up to do the same. Jordo gets the first dance with Rina, and tells her he has no intention of ending their engagement. But even if he fell for someone else, Rina would be okay with it. Jordo realizes she's too dense and has no idea how strongly he feels for her. Then he pulls her in and tells her like this he can take her at any time. He then goes for a light kiss on her neck. However, Rina couldn't tell what it was. He then says that's all he'll do for now, and then takes his leave. Keith then walks over to wipe it off, telling her it was a bug, with the completely dense Rina thanking him and being none the wiser of what he was actually wiping. Nicole then asks for the next dance, and as they move, the crowd stares at them in awe. But little do they know, Rina finds it awkward that Nicole goes completely silent during conversation. She then asks if there's anyone he's interested in, to which he answers there is, but it's really someone he shouldn't have feelings for, leaving Rina wondering if it's someone's wife or another guy. She then gets some time to herself outside, where Maria and Sophia are eager to dance with her too. And even though it's getting a little weird, Rina is willing to let them take turns. So they dance the night away, with Rina having enjoyed her time before her days at the academy begin. The day would eventually come where Rina and Keith got a farewell from their parents before heading to school. While Duke Claes was proud and teary-eyed, the Duchess couldn't help but scold Rina, telling her not to be a slob. The two siblings would begin their carriage journey, with Rina eventually making it to the school gates, where the game Fortune Lover canonically begins. Inside her dorm, she thinks of the heroine, remembering that with a school full of nobles, Maria will be the only commoner enrolled, and on top of that, possessing the exceedingly rare light magic. Rina's conscience begins to discuss how things are going to play out, because she knows Rina's relationships with the 4 boys will determine whether she lives or dies. With Giordo, even though he originally proposed to Rina to take responsibility for her scar, he refuses to end their engagement, telling her, nope, it's definitely still there. Keith ended up not being a playboy thanks to all of Rina's efforts to spend time with him. However, now that he's grown, many girls find him handsome, so he's unconsciously turning into a playboy. Alan got rid of his inferiority complex and developed his music talent. But unlike the game, his fiancée Mary doesn't seem attracted to him. And lastly, there's Nicole, who remains silent and expressionless. However, Rina has become great friends with his sister, Sophia, so how fate will change for all of them has yet to be seen. At the entrance ceremony, as the principal gives his speech, Rina looks amongst the students hoping to see Maria. Giordo asks what's wrong, but Rina says everything's fine, so he invites her to eat sweets in his dorm afterwards. Rina meets Giordo at his dorm, with Keith, who Giordo isn't too happy to see. Rina then begins digging into the sweets, but chokes when she hears that Giordo walked a lost girl with light magic to her dorm. She recalls the in-game event where Maria tries to climb up a tree in order to find her dorm, and Giordo meets her for the first time. And Rina can't help but feel the events are unfolding the same. Thinking Giordo will fall in love with Maria pretty soon, Keith thinks it's interesting that there's another girl who climbs trees just like Rina. However, this event didn't surprise Giordo much since he's used to it by now, and he's always found Rina's tomboy attitude very charming. Rina is losing her shit because the route Giordo and Maria date is the route she dies. She lies in bed, unable to sleep, thinking she can't let her guard down. Giordo's fate on her mind constantly. On their first day of school, Keith mentions he also met the girl with light magic recently, which causes Rina to freak out. She remembers he and Maria meet when he tries to hit on her. Rina grabs Keith asking if he's flirting with a new girl. This causes him to blush, but he says he would never do something like that. He then explains he met her by picking up the handkerchief she dropped, which Rina remembers happened in the game as well, plus some flirting. Rina then asks Keith if he fell in love with the girl, causing him to get flustered again, and Rina thinking she's got it all figured out. She tells him she won't get in their way and shakes him, cheering them on. But I'm pretty sure this isn't how he feels at all. Inside the halls, Rina crosses paths with a blonde-haired girl. The two exchange glances, and without a doubt, this girl is the heroine, Maria Campbell. And during class, Rina gets so distracted by Maria, the teacher has to tell her to focus on the lecture, and she's so distracted, even on the way home, Rina's friends notice something's bothering her. Rina thinks this is no time to get careless. Maria will soon charm all the boys. Her conscience panics, thinking she's on the route to doom, but studious Rina comes up with a plan to start farming, because if they get exiled, at least they can get by with their farming skills. So she gets permission from the school to start a flower garden, but she didn't tell them she'd be growing vegetable crops instead. And when her group of friends finds her, Alan starts to burst out in laughter over how ridiculous Rina is being. At the exam ranking board, Rina spots the top placings. All the top-ranked students must join the student council. She sees first Giordo, second Maria, and third Alan. Alan appears, and we learn that he's supposed to fall for Maria after she tops his score, which is supposed to make him mad. When Rina asks how he feels about coming in third place, he isn't bothered by it. He thinks of when Rina once told him, everyone has things they're good at and things they're bad at. Later, at the student council office, she gets served tea by the council president, Sirius Deke. Rina asks why Sirius and Nicole are the only second-year students in the council, and Sirius explains his classmates left after fighting over Nicole all the time, making Rina sweat thinking of his devilish charm. The next person to greet Rina is Maria herself, with a plate of sweets as well. As they enjoyed tea time together, Rina asks if Maria ever brings the sweets she makes personally to school, causing Maria to look down in complete silence. Maria asks how Rina knows she makes sweets, but she can't say from the game, of course, so Rina makes the excuse that the cafeteria ladies told her. Maria buys this excuse and then says she doesn't know if her sweets will be good enough for their friends to enjoy, but Rina is ecstatic to have homemade sweets and convinces Maria to make her some. On the way home, Rina smells something delicious and walks over to some bushes. She finds some girls harassing Maria, saying her cheap commoner snacks aren't worthy enough to be served to the student council. One of the bullies goes to step on the desserts, and Rina comes to the rescue, getting enraged that the homemade sweets are being ruined. This scares the other girls off. reminding us that having the face of a villain really pays off sometimes. Rina looks at the snacks on the ground. Old habits never die, as she picks up and starts to eat, standing up with her face covered in food. Maria looks at her, and Rina screams in her mind because she accidentally ate all the snacks. But Maria doesn't really mind though. It's just that all the food was on the ground. Rina ignores this to praise Maria on her professional level dessert skills, making her smile. During her gardening time, Rina remembers she was actually the one who bullied Maria during that in-game event, and Jordo was originally the one who defended Maria and ate her sweets off the ground, meaning Rina inadvertently prevented Jordo's relationship with Maria from progressing, thus saving herself from a route of doom. The next day, Rina has a study session with Maria. She constantly needs help because she's actually stupid and consistently scores below average, with the notable rank of 88 amongst the first-year students. Maria offers to help anytime and hands a plate of delicious snacks to Rina. Upon eating them, Rina thinks of how all their friends also enjoy Maria's delicious treats, as she has a real knack for making confectionaries. Sirius then serves tea for the two girls to enjoy, and Rita remarks how she's surprised he's from the prestigious Deke family, and that he is the current #1 ranked student among all the second years, even having a larger fan base than Nicole's. Later in the hallway, as Rina walks, she greets Maria. Maria doesn't acknowledge anything, leading Rina to believe she must be getting bullied, that she needs to help Maria make friends. Rina later asks her brother for advice on how she can become better friends with Maria, and he suggests they spend more time with Maria outside of the student council office. During lunchtime, Rina decides to search for Maria at her usual in-game lunch place, and sees her being bullied by the other girls. One of the girls is about to strike Maria with fire, so Rina uses her earth bump to knock the girl over. She then runs over to defend Maria, telling the girls they need to stop their bullying just because they're jealous of her academic talents. She basically tells them to fuck off, scaring the girls into running away. Rina then turns back to Maria, who is in tears of joy because she finally has a friend who will treat her well, and begs Rina to call her Maria without any honorifics. Later at night, Rina ponders why the bullies would go so far as to using magic to harm Maria. It then suddenly clicks in her brain that this was also an in-game event where she had actually told the girls to attack. But then Maria ends up getting saved by Keith's Earth doll, and with Rina realizing she's stolen another romance route that Maria could have, she praises herself while drooling in her sleep. The next day, Rina felt the need to keep tabs on Maria's relationships developing. She asks Maria if she likes anyone, but Maria and the other girls respond that they just like Rina. They all have an upcoming day off, and Maria explains she has to head home and spend time with her family. So logically, Catarina felt the need to head to where Maria lives with her brother Keith tagging along. It all started with Keith finding her dressed up for the fields in the morning. However, he wasn't expecting her to tell him that she wanted to go see some real farm fields outside of her garden. Rina and Keith spent their time learning how to farm, observing various vegetables and even a giant pumpkin. They then head to a local town, and Rina asks some of the townsfolk where Maria lives. So they point her in the right direction and explain that Maria is famous in these parts for being kind and also for being a commoner with light magic. They finally spot Maria's house and decide to head over. They meet with Maria's mother, who is surprised to learn that Maria had been making sweets at school for them. Then Maria walks in, happy to see her friends visiting. Her mother is shocked to see the joyous expression that Maria wears, but the only expression Rina knows how to wear is hunger for Maria's sweets. Maria offers to make sweets, and while she's doing that, Rina decides to test her new farming techniques on the family farm. While Maria started to work on the confectionaries, she thought back at her happiest moments of making treats with her parents. She lived a normal life, until one day, she healed one of her friends with light magic. The townsfolk began to scrutinize her and her family, suspecting Maria to be an illegitimate daughter of a noble, since light magic is usually only passed down amongst noble families. Despite this, she tried regaining her normal life, but everyone treated her differently, which only made her feel more isolated. One day, she even made treats for her whole class, only for exactly no one to partake in enjoying her sweets with her. And on her lonely walk home, she desperately wished that someone would just look at her. Maria's mother remembers that day. From then on, Maria would no longer make sweets. She couldn't help her daughter, as she had her own problems to deal with, but this didn't make her feel any less terrible as a mother. However, seeing Maria happily make treats for her friends brought tears to her eyes. So the mother decided to dig up the old cookie cutters out of the closet, and the two began to bond once again over making cookies together as a family. The four of them basked in the tasty cookies, And as they all said their goodbyes for the evening, Maria's mother asked the siblings to continue to be good friends with Maria, to which Rina happily acknowledged. The heartwarming moment between mother and daughter made Catarina want to visit her own mother, so the siblings decided to head home. But instead of being greeted with a heartwarming moment from the Duchess, instead, Catarina got the death stare from her mother, all because their mom found out that Rina was growing a farm on the school grounds, and Rina screamed knowing she was going to receive a spanking. We then turn to Sasaki Atsuko, or as Rina called her, Ah-chan, who had been missing Rina this whole time. We get a glimpse in time of their first meeting, where Rina had apologized for almost killing Ah-chan with her butt. Ah-chan remembered Rina as a person who brought color to her life. She finally had someone to talk to about books and games. She even helped Rina study, even though Rina was both stupid and lazy, leading to the two of them passing and getting into high school together. Their days were happy until suddenly Rina passed away from getting into a traffic accident. And even though she felt lonely again, as she walked home from the funeral, she saw her last message from Rina on her phone. It read, "Ah-chan, I can't conquer the black-hearted sadistic prince, Jordo," which caused her to laugh and then cry, hoping that if she were to be reborn when her life ended, she'd want to befriend Rina again. But why is Sophia Ascart the one crying with these dreams constantly recurring? She decides to visit Rina, hoping to get comfort from her sad dream. Rina thinks she must be nervous with the exams upcoming, and it's something she has to take seriously herself, since her mom will yell at her if she doesn't pass and graduate. We move to the day of the practical exam, where the professor tells them they must retrieve a magic stone from inside the ruins in order to pass. They can't take the exam lightly, as it's a difficult maze with various traps layered throughout. And even with the task being dangerous, to be able to navigate the ruins and find the stone is to test all of their understanding of their own magic abilities. Catarina's team heads inside the maze, and while Jordo and Keith argue over who's going to protect Rina, she accidentally presses into a trap and causes a boulder to chase after them until they get away. They eventually stumble upon a crossroads and an ancient text that Rina can't read at all, even though they've been learning how to read ancient script in class. After Sophia reads the text, they learn the west path will be difficult, but towards their destination, and the east path will lead to a dead end. Rina wants to head east first, since in video games, dead ends often lead to treasure chests. However, the crew drags her west and ignores her ridiculous comment entirely. They continue their trek, and Rina wishes she could be more useful to the team. She decides to use her earth bump to fill a tiny pothole, so that way no one can trip on it, and the boys praise her for her basically useless talent. Rina continues forward and accidentally triggers an arrow trap, so Jordo and Keith have to protect them all. However, Rina ends up falling into a trap through the wall, reaching a floor below. She calls out hoping someone would find her, but no one can hear her at all. She decides to survive. She needs some food. She spots some mushrooms she can eat, all while an ominous black cloud appears behind her and disappears. Near the entrance, the group gets together, trying to come up with a plan to search for Catarina. Nicole then comes up with a plan to use his wind magic because it can pick up people's voices through air vibrations. Both him and Sophia summon the winds and pick up on Catarina discovering more mushrooms in a large chasm. Rina has a difficult time picking the mushrooms, but conveniently, she finds a crystal next to her and easily snips the mushrooms for easy collection. She feels a black presence around her again and then trips, hanging on to a ledge. Sophia then grabs her in the nick of time, and as they're about to fall, a mysterious wind saves the two of them. The group arrives at the scene, happy to see Rina survived. Then Alan notices the rock Rina was using to cut mushrooms was actually one of the magic stones they needed to pass the exams. Rina never noticed the magic inside of the rock because she was too hungry, causing Alan to laugh over her sheer stupidity. While the group celebrates, Maria notices a black shadow hovering over Rina, wondering what it is. She doesn't get to talk about it, however, because Rina wants to have a mushroom party. A few days later, however, the worst is to come. The doom flags Catarina had been trying to avoid have come to fruition, with the girls at school ready to make Rina atone for all the atrocities she's committed. But wait, what has she actually done? Was it when she started farming on school grounds, or when she would sometimes throw toy snakes at Jordo? No, she's being demonized for flaunting her status as a duke's daughter and Prince Jordo's fiancé, and also for her constant bullying of Maria because of her rare light magic and closeness to everyone in the student council. Then it suddenly clicked. These are all the things Catarina was accused of in the original game, but after getting exposed, the ones who were supposed to confront her were either Keith or Jordo, depending on the route the heroine was on. They were supposed to take a stand to protect Maria, so none of this makes sense, because Rina hasn't been bullying her at all. However, all the girls insist they witnessed Rina doing it, with paper stacks of evidence in hand as well. And when Jordo and the gang walk in, the accusers hand the paper evidence over to Rina's friends, leaving her worried that all the doom flags had finally caught up to her. Rina is terrified of her fate to come, but she has nothing to fear because Maria tells them their claims are ridiculous. And reading the quote-unquote evidence, every single one of Rina's friends, from her fiancé Jordo to her brother Keith, Mary, and Alan, all of them think Rina is too simple-minded to scheme up an elaborate bullying plan. And even though they're defending her, Catarina can't help but feel a little insulted. But it's true that Marina has been experiencing bullying throughout her school days, not from Rina, but these girls who are accusing her. And as they continue to run off, Maria sees some malicious shadows clinging to the girls. With Rina's worries behind her, she begins to eat, as her friends all discuss the suspicious actions from the girls that were accusing Rina. It was really convenient for Rina to get accused while the student council was called away, as if the girls had been waiting to strike when they knew all of Rina's friends weren't going to be there. However, Rina doesn't think much of it as she continues to eat and celebrate that she's avoided all of her doom flags. The friends walk together after lunch, but when Maria spots another menacing black shadow, she tells them she's got to head somewhere by herself. Rina would come to regret this, as it would be the last time any of them see her. 2 days later, Rina beats herself up at the student council office for not going with Maria. As Sirius serves her some of the warm, gentle tea, she can't help but feel he's worried for Maria too. All of her friends must be worried as well. She becomes more determined to search, and they all search, but another day passes with no results. Later that night, Jordo comes to visit Rina, not with any information on where Maria is, but instead to bring her attention to the evidence papers the girls from earlier had on her. Jordo and the gang had found out that not only were the girls not the ones who had put the papers together, but they also had no memories from the day they tried to persecute Rina. Those girls had suddenly been overcome with a strange urge to attack Rina's character, but as soon as they left the cafeteria, the feelings disappeared. It was as if someone had been controlling them. Jordo then explains it must be the result of the forbidden dark magic, the sixth element of magic that only a scant few in the entire country know about. A magic that can manipulate people's hearts. A magic that no one is born with, but is obtained as a result of human sacrifice. And the dark magic user seems to be targeting Catarina, with Maria being a casualty because light mages can see the black shadows that emanate off of the use of dark magic. Jordo suspects Maria must have pursued the dark mage after realizing what was happening, and as a result, got abducted. The shadows end up consuming all of Catarina's friends. If she knew this was the fate awaiting her, she would have gladly taken the doom flags by herself. She awakens in tears from the nightmare. It must have been because of the conversation she had with Jordo earlier. She starts to shake when she remembers the human sacrifice required to obtain the dark magic. The next day, she falls over from her exhausting late night. Her friends take her to the nurse's office, and after waking up from a refreshing nap, she decides to visit the spot where she and Maria first became friends. She thinks about the time they had spent together and worries deeply for Maria's safety. Then, Sirius suddenly appears, asking what she's doing. So Rina explains she had just woken up and this area always made her think of her dear missing friend. He tells her with Maria missing, it's dangerous for her to be out here alone, and offers to walk her to class. And as the wind blows, she takes notice of how pretty his bright red hair and glittering gray eyes are, but also wonders what he's doing out here. She then gets a flashback of when Achan had told her about a hidden character that can be conquered in Fortune Lover, a dangerous guy with black magic, a bad ending where the protagonist and all her friends get killed by him, bright red hair and gray eyes. Oh shit. It's definitely Sirius. With her lost in thoughts, Sirius asks her what's wrong. She then responds by asking if he has dark magic and if he was the one who kidnapped Maria. But he has no idea what she's talking about. Of course he wouldn't. Even Rina only learned about dark magic last night, and this world must be different from the actual Fortune Lover game, since so many events are different. There's no way someone as kind as Sirius could be behind all the misfortunes. But he then breathes a sigh, annoyed that she always referred to him as kind. After all, it's all been an act, since it's easier for him to get by if he pretends to be a nice, quiet boy. And luckily, dumb fucks like Baccarina totally fall for it. He then tells Rina he did kidnap Maria, right after she confronted him for the black aura that seemed to surround him. He tried to manipulate her memories to forget what she saw that day, but Maria resisted it because of her light magic. So he grabbed her and knocked her out with some chemicals and took her away. All of this because he truly hates Catarina for the way she helps the lonely guys around her. Catarina knows Sirius may be fated to kill her friends, but she can't help but feel there's something really sad within him, as if he could cry at any time. He brushes her hand away and rejects her, wrapping her in an endless darkness that puts her to sleep. Things were a normal day for this girl, woken up by her mother, scolding her for being late for school after another session of all-night gaming. She goes to the mirror to fix her hair, but can't quite get the calyx out like her maid Anne. But wait, who is Anne again? Remembering she's late for school, she tells her mother and brother goodbye as she runs off, with a cucumber in her mouth. She thinks she's safe, but the teacher tells her she's totally late. During lunchtime, the girl enjoys pleasantries with her best friend, Achan. They talk about their favorite ultimate game, Fortune Lover, with the girl excited that she's about to conquer the self-centered Prince Alan. But for some reason, he doesn't seem so self-centered lately. He's actually become pretty nice and easy for her to talk to. With the girl pondering her mysterious emotions around characters from the game the two of them enjoy, she ignores her underlying feelings to enjoy her meal. Her usual routine, sleeping in class, getting smacked by the teacher to wake up, the normal day by day, spending time with her family, and reading manga with Achan. But the girl can't help but feel she's forgetting something important. We then turn back to Rina, who's fallen into a deep slumber for the past 2 days. Her friends gather, completely depressed and disheveled, hoping because they've hired the best doctor in the country, they can find a solution to awaken Rina. Anne tells the friends to enter Rina's room, so they gather around the doctor, who tells them nothing is physically wrong with her, and that she could awaken at any time, as soon as right now, or maybe never. Keith freaks out at the doctor, and Jordo hits the wall. Everyone is depressed from the horrible news. Later that night, Anne tries to give Rina some water to drink, completely distracted with heartbreak. When she hears a knock on the door, she drops the teapot and it shatters. Jordo checks if everything's alright, but they're all hanging on by a thread. Regardless, he takes over to watch Catarina. Holding her hand at her bedside, he utters her name, and remembers the strange girl he had fallen for. His world was once colorless and filled with boredom. It was her who filled it with color, showing him happiness and pleasure, jealousy and loneliness as well. She taught him all these emotions. Even though he knew danger was near, he felt helpless for being unable to protect her. He then grabs the water and gives it to Rina with a kiss. Outside the door, Keith sits with a gloomy expression, remembering the warmth his dear sister had given him, brightening his world and saving him from loneliness. He vowed to get strong enough to protect her, but beat himself up for not being there when she needed him. Mary sat alone in Rina's garden, reminiscing on the first time they had met, remembering how shy and timid she was. But when Catarina had told her she was special and amazing, she began to love herself and accept herself. She just wanted to be with the one who was most precious to her. We turned to Alan, slamming his fist against a tree, remembering Rina had told him everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Since he was young, he had always sulked about being less talented than Jordo, but when Rina constantly competed with him head-on, he was able to loosen the tension he had put on himself. Being around Rina made him feel so comfortable, it felt as if it was the most natural thing in the world to him. And he felt foolish that he now just realized he's in love with her. Nicole stood alone on the balcony, remembering Rina's comments about how blessed he was for having such a lovely family. Growing up, most people had pitied him for the way his sister looked, even though he constantly told everyone there was nothing wrong with her. He eventually developed a growing frustration that no one else seemed to understand, but Rina did, and from then on, Rina became someone special to him. Even though she's engaged to his best friend Jordo, he can't pursue her no matter how he feels, but he still desires to stay as close for as long as he can. Sophia lies in bed, thinking of when Rina had told her that her white hair was as beautiful as silk and eyes twinkled like rubies. Her whole life, people had called her creepy and cursed because of her looks, but Catarina called her pretty and became the first friend she ever made. She eventually left the room that she always locked herself in to spend time with Rina, and this changed the way she lived moving forward. She doesn't want to lose her dear friend. While crying on her bed, she suddenly hears the voice of Achan saying she finally found her best friend again and she can't bear to lose her. Sophia then gets up and heads to the window to see Achan as her reflection, saying she's going to save her best friend this time. Achan tells Sophia to stop moping and to take her to Rina. Then one by one, the friends all become determined to save Catarina and stay by her side. They all make it back to the room, and Achan tells Sophia she'll handle this, but they all need to keep calling Catarina's name. Back at school, the girl runs. She makes it to the classroom, where Achan had called to meet her. They sit down, and while the girl talks about how she's having trouble conquering the Giordo route, Achan interjects to ask the girl how everything's going at school. The girl asks what she means, then gasps when she sees an image of Sophia flash in front of her. Achan is glad she was able to spend time with the girl again, but reminds her that this isn't her world anymore. It's back with everyone else, and everyone else that's calling her name out. The name Catarina is called over and over, with the friends from another world all begging her to wake up and come back. The girl wonders how she could forget. Her family was annoying but kind. She had an otaku best friend and a beloved otome game. And even though this world is comfortable to be in, Catarina has to go back to the world where all her loved ones are waiting for her. A light flashes and the classroom breaks apart. As the two say their goodbyes, Achan tells Rina that Maria is being kept in the school storehouse. She then tells Rina to save everyone, and as Rina falls, she reaches her hand out, calling her best friend's name one last time. Her best friend that she's been through so much with. And as Achan reaches her hand out, Rina thinks about how she's glad she's been given the chance to give her final farewell. And with tears in her eyes, Rina thanks Achan for always being there for her. With tears in Achan's eyes as well, she's glad she has another chance to spend time with her beloved friend. Now, they'll spend time together in another world, with her as Sophia. On the other side, Catarina tells Sophia not to cry, and everyone rejoices over her return. Rina then tells them she's going to save Maria because of some knowledge she gained in her dream. She also exposes Sirius as the culprit of all the misgivings. So the gang begins their trek to the storehouse that was coincidentally built by the Deke family. They find a hidden pathway in the dust-covered storehouse and break into the room where Maria is held captive. Catarina embraces Maria, relieved that she's safe, but it's not over because Rina wants to try talking to Sirius one more time, all to figure out his reasoning for his actions. We find him in a dark room with eerie lit candles against the walls. Sirius then hears a demonic voice that tells him people are approaching and that he cannot afford to get caught. He utters his fears as his doom has come, but the demon voice reminds Sirius what his mother had said that day, before being killed when she had told Sirius to avenge her. The voice beckoned Sirius to eliminate everyone using his dark magic. And when the gang reached his room, dark energy poured out, and Giordo and Alan drew their swords ready to fight. But Sirius was most puzzled by Catarina. Not by her waking up, but instead why she came back to him after he tried to eliminate her. After all, he admits to having fully intended to kill her, but she doesn't feel what he did was that bad, nor does she believe he actually tried to kill her. Because if he wanted to kill her, why did he not just do it on the spot instead of putting her to sleep? She wants to try talking to Sirius again, because when she saw him before, he looked truly sad and like he was in pain. However, the man before them isn't Sirius. That boy died long ago. The man standing before them is Raphael Waltz. And 8 years ago, his mother was killed in front of him in this very room. We move to Raphael's past, where his mother said the tea he makes has such a gentle flavor, exactly what Rina had been saying. He smiled overjoyed that the tea he had been working to perfect was something that his mother could enjoy. Then suddenly, some men barged into their home, and next thing he knew, he had awakened in the storehouse with the woman standing before him. Raphael struggling to escape his bindings. He could only watch as the woman approached the dead boy adjacent to him, as she told her beloved not to worry because he'll have a new body soon. The woman called in the sacrifice, which was Raphael's mother, and we learn that the mysterious woman is the mother of the already dead boy, Sirius Deke. Raphael's mother begs Mrs. Deke not to harm her son, but Mrs. Deke felt contempt towards the mother for stealing her husband away. She then tells them she has no intention of letting the two live happily. Mrs. Deke plans to transfer Sirius's soul into Raphael's body using dark magic. A man in the room begins chanting, and darkness illuminates around Raphael's mother. Then the man sacrifices her to complete the ritual. And as Raphael screams her name, she called for him to avenge her. Now that the man had obtained dark magic, he touched the two boys' heads and began moving Sirius's memories over as Raphael screamed his lungs out. Mrs. Deke then came to the boy, ecstatic to hear him call her mother. The man who had done the deed then told her with the mission complete, he'd like to head back to his own family, only to get backstabbed by the men behind him, all because Mrs. Deke intended to leave no witnesses behind. Raphael explains it was Sirius's memories that told him his playboy father had an affair with the maid who was Raphael's mother. And these memories were the only thing that transferred, along with the dark magic, since both Raphael's mind and soul remained completely intact. Raphael had been pretending to be the good boy Sirius the entire time in order to inherit the Deke family name and to get revenge on the woman who killed his mother. The darkness grows, but Catarina chooses to walk towards him anyways. She acknowledges she's just a villainess playing the heroine's role. And if she can't save him, she at least wants to comfort Raphael and be by his side, just like her friends have done for her the entire time. Raphael then remembered a time when his mother had told him something similar, that she wouldn't leave his side until he felt better. So don't cry alone, his mother had said. And now Rina too was standing before him and calling out his true name, confused at how he should feel. Raphael remembered his mother's true dying words, which were, "Please live, be happy, and I love you." Raphael then reaches out for Rina's hand, but then the darkness tells him not to listen to her. With Raphael's desire for revenge quelled, the darkness reveals itself to be the man who killed Raphael's mother. The man had survived to get his revenge on Mrs. Deke and is unwilling to let go of his control over Raphael. The darkness swarmed them all, but Rina held Raphael's hand, reassuring him. Raphael disavowed the man, saying he didn't need him anymore, and a light flashed, freeing him from the cursed dark magic. With the whole ordeal resolved, Raphael would eventually tell the authorities everything. He would leave school for the time being and go on a minor journey to atone for his sins. His testimonies also exposed Mrs. Deke and her underlings, landing them all jail time. And while Rina missed Raphael at school, she's glad she was able to save everyone from dying, with the final challenge being the second year's, or aka Nicole's, graduation party. In the original game, Maria is supposed to leave the party midway and confess to who she truly loves. So Catarina's fate rests on Maria's path of a good or bad ending. She's been preparing her entire life for both. Toy snake to throw at Giordo if she needs to escape, or all the things she'll need pre-packed if she gets exiled. With her plan having been culminating over the past 8 years, she's ready to take it all on. Nicole receives flowers from some ladies congratulating him, and when they run away, the main group of girls gives him their gifts. However, Rina's is a veggie bouquet, and the sight of it giving all the boys in the group a good laugh. Then, while Giordo and Alan give their musical performance, Rina looks at Maria, wondering which guy she's going to choose. She worries it could end up being a reverse harem route, where Maria ends up with all the guys. And supposedly, that's a route where Catarina dies as well. She then heads over to Maria, and with a heavy sigh, asks her directly if there's a boy she likes. Maria thinks for a second, but responds that she isn't interested in any boys. Maria then says the line's meant for the guy she conquers in the game, and asks Catarina to stay by her side, which catches Rina off guard. But then, Maria and Sophia butt in, because they want to stay with Catarina forever too, and so do the boys. Rina looks around and comes to the conclusion that this must be the friendship ending, where the heroine doesn't end up with anyone, but everyone remains friends. So she celebrates avoiding her doom. The friends hang out in the student council room, and when Mary serves tea, Catarina gets a familiar taste. Raphael comes back as a surprise, and we learn that even though he wasn't able to graduate, he's been hired to work for the school's Department of Magic. He then kneels before Catarina, asking to stay by her side, and she welcomes him into her life with open arms. Catarina had thought that she had the worst luck, being reincarnated as the villainess in her favorite Ultimate game, but instead, she became the luckiest, with a new set of friends and family that love her. Watch this next video. I'm ComfyTea, and I'll see you all in the next one.